Now, with the general election now less than 8 months away, one of the biggest political battlegrounds will be over the massive welfare budget. The government says it wants to bring fairness back to the welfare system, so a cap on the amount a household could claim has been introduced. That meant a limit of £26,000 a year, and the government says it's on track to save around £225 million come April 2015.
So is getting tougher on benefit claimants the right thing to do, or is it deliberately targeting the most vulnerable in society? Well, joining us now to discuss that are Adam Memon, Head of Economic Research at the Centre for Policy Studies, and Eva Neitzert, who's the Deputy Chief Executive at the Fawcet Society, which campaigns for equality. Also joining in from our central London studio is disability campaigner Lisa Egan. Thanks very much to all three of you for joining us this morning. Before we get started, though, a reminder that you can join in the debate at home as well. We'll
try and bring some of these in if we possibly can, and do email us at news@sky.com, text us 84501 or tweet us at Sky News with the hashtag Sky Debate. Let us know what you think. If there's any points you want to put to our particular guests here, we'll try and do that, and we'll try and read some of your comments out as we go along.
Indeed. Well, Adam Memon from the Centre for Policy Study here in the studio. First of all, what do you think cutting benefits achieves in society?
Well, I think there are two sides of that. So firstly, there's reasons of economic efficiency, and secondly, most importantly, there's reasons of social justice. So obviously we have a £100 billion deficit. It's important to make savings, but most importantly, we'd have to really try to say that actually you need to be better off in work than out of work. So the benefit cap which was introduced, which says that you can only have £26,000 more in total benefits, has led to more people in work. If you look at things like the changes to housing benefit reform, it means that you have 450,000 socially rented houses with 2 or more spare bedrooms, compared to 360,000 houses which are overcrowded conditions. So it's changing those conditions, those aspects of things which make it easier for people to get back into work. I think we have to look also at, say, a single mother with 2 kids who's on a job of £23,000, for example. We have to ask, is it right that that single mother has £100 a week, roughly £100 a week, after you take income tax, after you take national insurance, after you take the withdrawal of benefits? So it's an entire system which needs to be changed to encourage work, and cutting benefits is one part of that. You
talk about encouraging working, but is there any real evidence that cutting benefits, putting a cap on benefits, incentivises people to get a job?
Well, actually, yes. So if you look at the recently published figures by the DWP, about 33,000 households were subject to the benefit cap, and of those 33,000, about 19,000 people within those households had found jobs. Many of them had looked for work as well. If you look at changes to disability and living allowance, things like programs like the New Enterprise Allowance, programs like Access to Work, Disability Confidence, those sorts of things, you see about 500 people who are disabled every week finding jobs. About 80,000 disabled people have found jobs because of that side of the welfare programme. So there is a lot of evidence of it.
Let's bring in Eva Neitzert from the Fawcet Society. Eva, is that a picture you recognise, that we're seeing rafts of people with disabilities across the UK being encouraged back to work because their disabilities are being cut?
That's certainly not what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of hardship as a result of these cuts, and there have been estimates that cumulatively by 2017 disabled people as a group will have lost $28 billion in their pockets. And the difficulty here really is that there aren't necessarily jobs and quality jobs for all these individuals to go to when they move off welfare. We recently did some research with low-paid women. 1 in 3 in London was on a 0-hours contract. Now, they might not be figuring in the government statistics of the unemployed, but in any given week they might also not be working. For many individuals who have come off welfare, so they're no longer in the unemployment statistics, they're actually just moving into a different kind of poverty. And interestingly, many of those who are in work are still receiving benefits. So we can't paint this as a picture whereby people are either out of work and receiving a lot of benefits, or in work and not receiving benefits. Last year, for the first time, there were actually more people in work on benefits than out of work individuals on benefits. That's the real picture.
Let's bring in Lisa Egan now. She's a disability campaigner. She's in our Westminster studio for us. Lisa, you've heard both sides of the debate from the Sky News studios here, from Adam and Eva. What do you think when you hear about what they're saying? What's the reality for you?
The reality is that Adam is incredibly wrong. Research by the Disability Benefits Consortium found that once the disability living allowance cuts come in, that 50,000 disabled people who are currently in work are going to have to give up work. So, of course, disability living allowance isn't an out-of-work benefit. Disability living allowance pays for mobility needs and it pays for care needs. And so if you need a wheelchair, if you need someone to help you get out of bed in the morning, those needs don't go away when you get a job. And in fact, if you remove that support, it's going to result in people currently in work having to give up work because they won't have someone to help them get out of bed in the morning. And of course there are cuts to access to work as well, which provides support for disabled people who are currently in work. Jenny Seeley, who co-directed the Paralympics opening ceremony, was, you've seen how brilliant she can be at her job, but she's at grave risk of losing the interpreters, the sign language interpreters that help her to do her job.
What quality of life, what difference does what difference does benefit, does help make to your quality of life?
It enables me to stay alive. And of course, when benefits are withdrawn, we see what happens. There was the tragic case of Mark Wood, who lives in David Cameron's constituency, who starved to death because his benefits were stopped. I don't need to tell you all about the suicides we've heard about. Stephanie Bottrell was on the front page of all the newspapers last year after her benefits had been cut. This is a really serious issue, and kind of these people from right-wing think tanks don't see human beings. They just look at people like me and they see pound signs and they think about their tax bill and they don't care about the actual human beings.
Adam, I know you're keen to get back on that, but if you can just hold fire for a second, because you've started sending us some emails with some messages about what you think. We'll take you through a couple of them. Jean Powell emailed in saying they always pick on the wrong people, the poor, the sick, the disabled. They're an easy target. They're taking from people who have nothing to start with.
Linda Kendall says this constant battering of those dependent on welfare must be horrendous for those who are in receipt of state support after losing their jobs through no fault of their own.
Let's have a closer look at what the political landscape looks like now when it comes to the welfare debate. Our political correspondent Anushka Astana has this assessment of where the parties stand on this critical issue ahead of the next general election.
When the coalition arrived in Westminster, it promised sweeping austerity, and it soon became clear that benefits would be one of the hardest hit areas, partly because they promised to ring-fence funding in schools and health, pushing the focus on welfare. Within that, politicians never very keen to go for pensions. The advantage of hitting benefits is it doesn't only save you money, it's also electorally very, very popular. If we look at the polls, one of the highest scoring policies is the welfare cap, £26,000 per family. The principle that you should never get more on benefits than if you were working. But what charities say is that it penalises particularly those with large numbers of children, families that would get a benefit top-up if they were working. Now, all of this puts Labour in a difficult position because of the popularity of the policies. The one area that they've really gone hard on is a policy that the government calls the spare room subsidy and that Labour calls the bedroom tax, that the Lib Dems have also now raised concerns about. Still, I think we can expect all three main parties, and I'm sure UKIP, to go into the next election promising tough action on benefits, because that is what the polls say the voters want.
Anushka Astana there. Well, let's bring back in Adam Memon from the Centre for Policy Study. We heard Lisa Egan a short while ago saying that people like you, they look at people like her and see pound signs. They don't see human beings. Is this part of the problem, that the government just looks at the welfare bill as a whole and thinks we need to cut money, let's cut this amount of money, and they don't actually think of the knock-on effects that it actually has on people's lives?
I think it's actually quite the opposite of what they've done, because we have about 100,000 entrepreneurs in this country who are disabled, who employ another 100,000 people. We have so many billions of people who could be in work but who aren't in work, who are talented, ambitious people. And the problem was, in the previous system, they were assessed and then never assessed again, essentially abandoned to worklessness. Now, we can say that obviously there are many people who need disability living allowance. We absolutely must give them. That's why actually spending on DLA is increasing from 11.5 billion to 13.4 billion. So it's increasing by 2 billion.
At the same time.
But
Sorry, just quickly, let's bring in Lisa, because she clearly wants...
Yeah, I was just going to say, they might be increasing spending, but it's not actually going to the disabled people who need the support. In the conversion from disability living allowance to personal independence payment, what they're doing is they're taking people like me with incurable conditions who previously had an indefinite award. Now, it didn't mean I'd been abandoned for life or whatever it is the right-wingers want to say. It means that they recognise that I had an incurable condition, and so continually reassessing something that's not going to go away is a waste of taxpayers' money. Now, under personal independence payment, they're planning to continually reassess people like me every 3 years. And so the government might be increasing spending, but it's not going to the disabled people who need the support. It's going to the government subcontractors.
You know that many people who with disabilities understate the severity of their disabilities. So many of them weren't actually getting the support that they needed.
And
so surely
it's
better.
like
Surely it's better for them to be assessed so that they can actually work out what it is that the help they need and whether or not they can go back to work and whether they should get the support they need.
Sorry, you seem to be under the complete misconception that disability living allowance is an out of work benefit. Disability living allowance pays for care needs and mobility needs only. The out-of-work benefit for disabled people too ill to work is called employment support allowance. Yeah. That's a very different kettle of fish from disability living allowance.
And I think if I can come in there, what Lisa's really pointing to is that there's actually been a lot of false economies in the government's reforms, whereby we might be on the surface making short-term savings, but in the long run there are far more significant costs. As Lisa said, if her benefits are cut, there is someone who's going to have to stop working to care for her. We've got lots of other examples with the bedroom tax or spare room subsidy. We know that there are individuals who were made homeless, and as a result local authorities have had to pick up the tab for emergency crisis accommodation, which is very costly. Eric Pickles, so one of the senior members in government, actually wrote to David Cameron prior to the bedroom tax being put in place, saying that he feared that this would lead to actually a net cost, this measure. And there are lots more examples. We're going to see 600,000 more children living in poverty by 2015-16. That's an absolute time bomb, because those are children that are going to go on to have far higher rates of criminal activity, worklessness and so on. It's been estimated that that already costs us $29 billion a year. So I think these are reforms that are littered with unintended consequences and false economies.
OK, Eva, Adam and Lisa, we're going to pause it just there for a moment.
This is Sky News. Coming up after the break, we'll be continuing our debate on whether the government should be tougher on welfare. We'll be hearing from the author, Owen Jones, who says the poorest in society are being persecuted, and from Steve Hughes, who says politicians need to be a lot smarter about who gets what. You're watching the Sky News debate, where we're discussing whether the government should be tougher on welfare.
Well, disability campaigner Lisa Egan is staying in on this, and we're also joined by Steve Hughes, the head of Economic and Social Policy Unit at the Policy Exchange, who thinks the government needs to be more selective in who gets benefits, and the author of The Establishment and How to Get Away with It, Owen Jones, who disagrees. And a reminder that you can join the debate too.
Email us if you want, news@sky.com, text us 84501 or tweet us @Sky News with the hashtag Sky Debate. Let us know what you think. Any points that you want to put to the guests, we'll try and do that as and when we can.
Indeed. Well, let's bring in now Owen Jones, the author and columnist from our central London studio. Owen, when we talk about the welfare debate, disability allowance debate, and the fact that it is obviously going to be a massive political issue, how much of a problem do you think is the gulf in perception between the reality of who gets what benefits, who's actually being helped, and what the public actually perceives?
Well, I'm glad you've asked me that, because I have to say, Sky, you're not getting away with how you open this debate or frame this question, which frankly might as well have been written by a government spin doctor. And the media has a huge responsibility for the fact out there people's perceptions of social security and the realities are just completely different universes. On average, people think 27% of benefits are lost to fraud. It's actually 0.7%. People think benefits are much higher than they are. They think people get them for much longer than they actually do. Most of our social security budget goes on pensioners who've paid in all their lives. Most working age benefits go to people in work. We have tax credits which are worth, what, £28 billion of spending each year. They're subsidising poverty pay because bosses aren't paying their workers properly. And we have housing benefit, about £24 billion a year, which is not going to tenants, but increasingly lining the pockets of private landlords, charging rip-off rents. And to sum up Britain today, the biggest benefit claimant, the most lavished benefit claimant, is the financial sector. Hundreds of billions of pounds ploughed into it after it plunged this country into economic disaster, but so few conditions attached, not lending, still paying more bonuses than all other EU countries put together. Compare that to the over 1 million benefit claimants sanctioned, their benefits stopped altogether, like a 60-year-old former army veteran in Manchester who was collecting money for the Royal Legion, had his benefits stopped because the fact he was volunteering for a charity showed he wasn't looking hard enough for work. One rule for those at the top and one rule for everybody else. And I have to say, you in the media have a huge responsibility for the fact people's perceptions of social security are so hostile, and this attempt to turn low-paid workers against unemployed people in particular with the politics of envy is reprehensible.
I hope you're helping redress that today, Owen. Let's bring in Steve Hughes from Policy Exchange. Steve, Owen talks about wrong decisions being made. How can we, as a country, make more right decisions about who receives benefits and avoid those who really, really need them being the ones that are actually suffering the most?
Well, I think we need to look at really what we want from a benefit system in the 21st century. Ultimately, what we should be aspiring to with the welfare state is a contributory principle, so what you pay in is reflective of what you get out of the system at the end. We should be creating a welfare system that supports those most in need. We should be building a welfare system that encourages self-reliance, and we should encourage a welfare system that is fiscally sustainable as well. We're not necessarily doing that at the moment. We're not necessarily helping the hardest to help within the welfare system who have overlapping needs, such as job seekers, who might have mental health problems, who might have substance abuse problems, and we need to ensure that they're supported through the welfare system, and that's what the next stage of the welfare debate needs to be about.
Well, we've been talking to some people up in Sheffield about what they think on this. Owen Jones says these are opinions shaped by a misguided media. Let's listen to what some of them had to say.
It needs to be livable. People need to be able to live on it, and it's tricky to live on 26,000 even in the north. I don't know what they're going to do in London.
I'm a single parent myself. I rely on benefits. Yeah, I've not got a massive family, but it enables me to work part-time and be a mum as well. And there's people with big families might have other issues, like medical issues, that means that they can't work.
Well, give them as much as they need. Yeah.
If the parents are not working, depending on the circumstance that they're in, the parents, I don't think it's fair for a family to get their benefit capped. And I think government should help big families who parents can't go out there and get work, because there's families who parents are trying to get work, but there's no work out there.
If they're not working, they're not actively looking for work, then I think a lot of people do begrudge them having the amount of benefits that they do, but it is quite hard to feed a family of 10 on 26 grand a year, really. This is quite difficult.
Well, let's bring Lisa Egan back in, a disability campaigner. Lisa, we heard there about some of the public's perceptions about people on benefits, life on benefits. Has that been an issue for you? Have you actually faced criticism, faced public perception when talking about it?
I've been told by online commenters that I should have been killed at birth to save the taxpayer money. It's really, you know, that segment was actually really heartening to hear that most people actually agreed that people who need support should get support. I wanted to return to something that the guy before me, whose name I've forgotten, sorry, brought up about the contributory principle. That's just not happening at the moment. You're getting people who have paid national insurance for 30, 40 years who are dying, allegedly fit for work, having been denied, you know, they paid their national insurance for years. They paid into an insurance scheme, something that should have supported them in their time of need. And then when they are in need, government subcontractors are telling them, nah, you're fit for work. And there have been so many cases of people who have died while supposedly fit for work. I can list a few names: Cecilia Burns, Larry Newman, Colin Traynor. The government is failing people. And at the very, very start of the debate, you mentioned fairness. You know, when you're talking about people who have paid national insurance for years and years and years, denying them the insurance payout that they paid for is not fair.
Steve Hughes, let's bring you back in. You talked a little earlier about how it's up to the benefit system to encourage self-reliance in society. Is that fair? Is it really up to the benefit system to encourage people to live their lives in a certain way? Surely the benefit system should be there as a safety net to catch people when they fall rather than teach them how to live their lives.
So when I'm talking about self-reliance, what I'm saying is that benefits shouldn't be paid to those people who don't necessarily need them. And what we have within the system is the remnants of a system that was ultimately created about 60 or 70 years ago. So we've got some means testing, we've got some universal benefits, and we need to understand and think about how those benefits interact with each other so they can support people, but where they don't need to support people, they should potentially be taken away. And if you look at some of the most recent reforms by the government, say for example on child benefit, where it has introduced some kind of means testings for those on the highest incomes, that is probably right, because those on the highest incomes don't necessarily need the benefit to pay for their children.
OK, we've not got very much time, but let's bring in Owen Jones briefly. Owen, what do you think the solution is to try and tackle the root causes of poverty in our society that's leading us down this debate?
Well, look, the social security cuts this government have introduced have failed on their own terms because spending on social security is going up. And the reason it's going up is because we're going through the longest fall in living standards since Benjamin Disraeli was Prime Minister in the 1870s. Most people in poverty in this country are in work, they earn their poverty, and as a result we're spending more and more money on in-work benefits to top up people's wages so they can live, and that includes housing benefit, because the vast majority of new claimants of housing benefit are in work. That's why we need a living wage. That'll help bring down the billions we spend subsidising poverty pay in this country, and we need to build houses.
We're out of time, but Owen, Adam and Lisa, thank you all very much for joining us in the debate.